We're off. Welcome to ECMAScript modules with me, your host, Kyle Coberly. So, let's talk about why we need modules. They're relatively new. We get them in JavaScript from Node originally. JavaScript didn't have them until, I don't know, 2018, 2019. So pretty new. Node has had them since it came out, which was like 2012, I want to say. And most languages have modules. JavaScript was actually a laggard in this regard. Pretty much every language has this idea. JavaScript did not. It works like this. So right now, if we want to have multiple JavaScript files in, like, let's say one HTML page, then what we do is you import one, and then you import the next one, and you import the next one. This is fine. The problem is they're all actually in the same scope. And so that means something in this file can change something in this file. Something in this file can change something in this file. And that is scary as shit. Because imagine now that you've got 80, 100 of these things, and all of them can modify anything in any other file. Now imagine you have 3,000 developers working on this. You can accidentally reassign variables that were declared in some completely other file. It's kind of a spooky thing. What we like in programming is keeping scopes small, tiny, tiny, tiny. So that if you're looking at a file, you don't need to worry about any other files. All that matters is the stuff that's in that one file. And if something else wants to use something in that file, you're explicitly saying what is and isn't available from that file. So what we want instead is all these little boxes that are all self-contained, and then they can explicitly send each other messages, import each other, what have you. These are modules. So this is putting Lodash in a script tag in your HTML file. This is importing Lodash from Node modules into a file. Solves the same problem, except these are all super self-contained. So let's see an example.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please do.
If you're exporting something from one JavaScript file to another one, and that thing that you're exporting is dependent upon another function in the original JavaScript file, you would also have to export the function that it's depending on, correct?
No, that's part of what's so cool about this. So if I have a file that's using something from another file, but this thing over here depends on all of this other stuff in that file, none of that needs to get exported. The only thing that I need is that. It'll have access to all of this stuff, but nothing else in here will. It makes this really like a hermetic seal around all of the rest of that stuff. I'll prove it. Actually, let me show you what these look like in real life. So we'll go back to that authenticated routes thing from the last lesson. Come on. Okay, so this is the router for the LMS. These are like all these links to different stuff. So this is like your activity, this is inbox, all those kinds of things. These components, these are getting imported. They're ECMAScript modules. So things like app error hey, something weird happened. This function is being exported out of this file and imported over here. So I can do things like use that right here because I exported it here. I didn't also need to re-export all of the other things that it was using. That's not important. I can pick and choose what I get out of it. So let's look at, actually, let's go over to Code Sandbox. Let's do some modules. And that's good too, because Code Sandbox has everything like configured for you already. It's a little bit tricky to do locally. Let's make not a vanilla app this time. We're going to make a Node app. Let's do Node HTTP server. Cool, very nice. All right, delete all the stuff in this file. Save it. Wait and hang out for a sec. Take a moment to get caught up. Your screen should look like my screen. All right, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to roll. I see some thumbs ups, some thumbs ups, some thumbs ups, a thumb sideways. All right, marching on. So let's make an add function. Takes in two numbers and returns their sum. Easy enough. And let's call it. And let's log it. Do I need to refresh? How do I run this? It's over here. No. Why won't this go? I don't think I have to do anything special in Code Sandbox. Let me try refreshing. Oh, maybe it... No, that's fine. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Maybe I need to start another one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so here's what I did to make that work. There's this little plus sign right over here. If you hit that, it'll give you another terminal. And you want to run node index.js. That just executes this file. And we should see some output. So take a second to get caught up. Your screen should look like my screen. Haven't done any special node things, really. Just writing JavaScript. All right, give me a thumbs up if you got it working. I see some thumbs ups, thumbs ups across the board. Excellent. So now let's move this add function into a module. So what we're going to do is make another file. So that's this icon right here. And we're going to call this one math.js. And I want you to copy and paste your add function into math.js. So when you're done, that math.js should have one file, and we should have this index.js that won't work right now because it doesn't have an add function. Here's the module magic. If I export default that function, now I can import it in to the index.js file. I can say import sum from ./math. Now note, has to start with a dot, should not have the JS at the end, but it's still pointing at that file. It's in the same directory, so pathwise, just like in module 1 or unit 1. We're pointing to that file. Oops, sorry, it's a add. Name that. There we go. Beautiful. So yeah, we're importing add from math and then using it here. So a moment of truth, do it still work? Oh, come on, man. This is exactly what I did in Code Sandbox. I wouldn't have to do this shit. All right. Find enough time to show you how to do this, I guess. All right, so there's a history behind modules. I mentioned that these come from Node, but they're actually just part of JavaScript now. There's a fractured way that we got there. So Node uses a thing called CommonJS. You'll know that you're using CommonJS because it uses the require keyword. Otherwise, it works the same way. The syntax is a little bit different. Under the hood, it's way different. But this is what we had like since 2012. Still gets used. It is still the default in Node. In fact, a new version of Node came out today, and they have not gotten any closer to moving to the next thing. So this goes back to like, oh, let's call it 2012. Starting around 2015, 2016, 2017, we started talking about something that wouldn't be specific to the Node platform, but would be a module system for like the language itself. And so those are called ECMA modules. ECMA is a standards body. They do like weights and measures kinds of stuff. And they um, they like own, I guess would be the right word, the trademarks and stuff for JavaScript. Well, Netscape, uh, like Brendan Eich made JavaScript while working for Netscape. So whoever owns that intellectual property now, probably Mozilla, owns the rights to like the word JavaScript. But it's an open standard, and like it's like a non-profity kind of organization that maintains JavaScript. They can't legally call it JavaScript, so they call it ECMAScript. So that's why you see ES all over the place. ES 2015, ECMA modules, ESM, all that sort of stuff. Um, and so they wanted something that was part of the language itself and came up with ECMA modules. I'm going to call that 2017 maybe. And up until today, these two things have been battling it out. We know where this goes. There's not anybody who wants CommonJS to like win. Everybody knows it's going to be ECMA modules. But the problem is that there's already 10 years of Node ecosystem that's based around this. And as I mentioned, under the hood, they're extremely different. So, like it's probably the most active development in Node right now is trying to figure out how the fuck do we do ECMA modules inside of Node. And it's just a very difficult problem. And so that's the reason that, that this isn't working. Because you have to kind of do some gymnastics to get Node to work with this like import-export syntax. Watch this though. If I make this, instead of export default, module.exports add, and instead of import add from math, I do const add equals require math. Now if I run it, it works.
We don't need to learn that, right? Just be familiar with it when we see it.
Exactly. And like they're not difficult. There's not a ton to this. Like that's it. That is how you import things in CommonJS. You save it into a variable and use this built-in require function. Exporting something with CommonJS, it's module.exports, and then you set it to whatever the thing that you're going to import is. That's the CommonJS way to do it. The ECMAScript module way to do it, export default add. Import add from math. Like, they're barely even different syntaxes, but here we find ourselves. All right, so that's the shape of this problem. Let's talk about how we get modules working in Node. Because you can't do it, it's just awkward. So I wonder if this version of Node will let me just change the file name to MJS. That was one of the proposed ways that we work with all this existing Node code, is that stuff that uses ECMA modules would have an MJS rather than a JS extension. Let's see if that does it. Okay, I think I also need to put something in the package JSON. Let's see, it's package JSON, enable ESM.
Because you still have the module.export.
Then it knows that I'm using ECMA modules. There we go, type module. That's the thing I was looking for. type module. All right, is that enough? I think I also need to change the actual node command. Yeah, it's also needs that. Told you it was awkward. Come on now. Is it experimental modules? Come on. Okay, to load an ES module, set type module in the package JSON or use the MJS extension. I did. Ah, fuck, that's irritating. Okay, let's do this. Let's make another sandbox. Why don't you go ahead and copy your add function. And let's make a vanilla. Because the vanilla template uses parcel, which already has all this stuff built into it. C. All right, so in the vanilla one, sum equals add 4 and 5. Okay, so I got that working. Take a second, get caught up. Your screen should look like my screen. Use a vanilla sandbox instead of the node one. All right, so if I do the same thing, inside this source directory, I make a new file, call it math.js, copy over this add function, and make it my default export. And then I make this import add from ./math. And if I run this, hey, there it is. I imported this module. I exported this function. Yes, I'm really importing the function from the module. I'm exporting the function from the module. That's modules. And really, the only other thing that I think is important to know about modules is, let's say we had more than one. Like I also had a subtract function. Well, all right, I can only have one default export in a file. So it makes a lot of sense in most circumstances, really. But if I had more than one, I can just say export instead of export default. And now, I use a very similar syntax to destructuring. Subtract. Looks just like destructuring. It's technically not destructuring, but does look the same. And now I've imported both of those. The only difference that I see, you are exactly the same as you used to be. There we go. Importing what we call named exports, or if we have a default export, then you leave off the curly braces. But that's how you share stuff between files in JavaScript. And what's really cool is if I have some function in Math.js that, I don't know, only gets used by um, these things. I might have some function. And maybe it's responsible for logging these. So I'll call this log. I can do that inside of these. I don't need to export them. And in fact, this index.js file can't even see that stuff. It's all tucked away. The only thing that anything can see out of the math function is add and subtract. It also can't change them. This makes like a lot of isolation between these files, which makes it so that we can have 5,000 developers working on this stuff and not worry that their variable names are going to run into each other. Because nothing has a bigger scope than its module.
Can you explain the default again? I wasn't
Sure.
too clear on that. When you would use it?
Totally. You use it when something really has one logical purpose for the module. So like a component in React, those are modules. It's the only thing that comes out of that module is the component. So for example, my error message component, or the indicator component that shows like the check mark is a component, the X is a component, all those kinds of things. That's the only thing in that module. So I don't need to give it like a named export like this. I would just say export default red X like that, or like, come on. Function. So if this was the red X component, it would probably look something like this, and then the thing that's importing it would be like import red X from ./redx. Now, like another cool thing, these don't actually have to be named the same thing. Like I could do that. That's completely fine. But yeah, if the module only has like one real purpose, then it's probably a default export. If it's something like math, where you might have a bunch of different things, then you can export them all separately. Okay, one other cool thing. So all of this is just our own files, right? We can also do this with node modules. Node modules are cool as shit. This is basically the entirety of JavaScript creation is all on this site called npm. You want Lodash? It is available as a node module. So, all right, well, how do I get it? If I'm on my own computer, then that's, come on. I might do npm install Lodash. If I'm on Code Sandbox, I look it up over here. So I look up Lodash. Hey, there it is. And now, if I want to use Lodash, let's say I want to deep clone something like John was talking about yesterday. I can import clone deep from Lodash, and now I just have that function. I have some object, I do that. All right, I want to make a copy of that object. So I say copy of object. Well, the problem is with objects, objects are always by reference. So that means if I change one of them, I change both of them. Like if I take a look at some object and copy of object, all right, those are the same. If I change one of them, like some object dot name is Elise, now they're both Elise. Uh-oh, how do I get around that? Well, I could use this clone deep function from Lodash, and now they're different. Lodash has like 100 of those kinds of things. And if I want to use any of these awesome functions, like compact, which just gets rid of falsy values in arrays and squishes it up, or fill, which says like, all right, I want to fill up this entire array with like a character. That's good in like some kinds of really low-level problem-solving things. Hey, flatten. Flatten deep if you have arrays on arrays on arrays on arrays. Dot flat will only do that one level. Flatten deep will do them all. There's probably the coolest thing in here is group by. So you can take an array and almost like invert it, where you have something like, so for this one is like, I want to organize these by how many characters are in each word. It'll turn that array into an object where the keys are the lengths of the thing, and each of them is set to an array with each matching value. Like it's really cool. They have a version of map that also works with objects. Tons and tons and tons of cool stuff. Shuffle, which randomizes stuff. It'll also randomize objects. Tons and tons and tons of these cool like utility functions. Getting the mean average of something. Clamping. Clamping is like, these values always need to be between 3 and 7. So if it's 2, I want you to clamp it up to 3. If it's 450, I want you to clamp it down to 7. That's a solved problem. Like, you don't need to write your own logic for that. That's dumb. So you can install Lodash, and then you can use that. So how many things are on NPM? 2 million packages of stuff that you can use that other people wrote. The only difference between those and the ones that you use yourself is that they don't start with dots or dot dots. That looks inside of your installed node modules. That looks for a file in this folder called math.js. Ta-da! Node modules, ask me some questions about them.
So every time you want to use something from Lodash, you have to import it from Lodash?
Correct.
Okay.
And yeah, you can do it. It only needs to be installed once, but yeah, this one could also use, it could use different stuff from node modules. Like I could import shuffle from Lodash. And in fact, some of those like things I do in the LMS, like look at all these things I pulled in from Lodash. Dates. Absolutely never in your entire career should you ever write any date logic. You will screw it up. Dates are so complicated with time zones and leap seconds and like absolutely not worth it. I don't care how small it is. Do not write your own date handling logic. There's all kinds of people whose entire lives are like making sure your date handling logic works okay. Probably the most popular one right now is called date FNs. It's a bunch of utility functions. So for example, the purpose of format is to take in a date and then format it year, month, day. Somebody else already wrote that logic. There's no purpose of me figuring out how to write that myself. React. React is an NPM module. I just import a bunch of functions from it. Versus these, all three of these are my own files because they start with dot or dot dot. They're paths to files. More questions about node modules or ECMA modules in general? Sort by most frequent. So like when I look at your submissions, I want the most bang for my buck. So I'll go and look at the ones that have the most responses first. And I'll look at the ones that like only one person has answered last. All of this is like very complicated logic that Lodash has just sort of encapsulated away in these modules. So I can just talk about, I can use them like Lego pieces. If I had to write all that code out by hand, that would be 3,000 lines of code probably. Axios. Really hate that parse JSON step in making a fetch request? Well, you don't have to do it with Axios. Solves the exact same problem as fetch. But hey, look, we get the response right away without having that step in between. You can make a pretty damn good case that that's a way better API for that. Or chalk. Chalk is like highlighting text. You want your console logs to show up a particular color? That's chalk. Moment is another date formatting library. That sucks. It's a bad one. But tons and tons and tons. All of our testing tools, all of these are NPM modules. That's what unlocks the entire world for you. More questions about modules? Have a nice lunch.